Who are we? We are a new EIS fund which has been created to support the creation and exploitation of new content, intellectual property effectively across the ever-growing media sector. We're a new fund, but we're an old team. We've worked together for many years across the media sector with some success, as you mentioned, the Atlantic Screen Group, which specialises as a music publisher in film music and TV music in LA and the UK particularly, has raised a considerable amount of money through the Cooper platform. So it seemed like the appropriate place to come and tell you about this today. So thank you for hosting our launch party. The aim is to raise 10 million into the fund quite quickly in the early part of the year, with a view to deploying initially that money across 3 distinct segments of the media sector. In particular, film and TV scores, which we obviously have considerable expertise in and knowledge of, TV series production, and comics, which is also a growing area. The media sector is particularly interesting to us because it's ever growing. It accounted for approximately £54 billion just in the UK last year, according to a PwC report, which is 4% of gross domestic product. That's expected to be 72 billion by 2021. But most interestingly, it's also an ever-changing sector. People talk about sort of the internet as the great innovation of our age, but I've always maintained that these things are the other great innovation. So the way people are accessing content is changing all the time. The team that we have has deep expertise across these sectors, entrepreneurs, founders of companies, people who've developed businesses in this sector for many years. So we have a reach which is quite individual and personal, and believe we're best placed to access that content. The fund is there to support the content that we find. So I'll try now to use the PowerPoint to sort of whiz through some of that in more detail, but hopefully give you a flavour of what we're about. Here's just a summary of what we covered, as I've just said. It's worth noting that in that growing sector, we're relatively conservative in some ways as a team. We're a funny mixture, as well as people who've worked in the media sector, of lawyers and accountants and other things. So we underpin our offering with good governance and good structures. And we've all learnt over the last 20 years in various ways how best to structure these companies. Atlantic Screen Group, which we'll touch on in a moment, is a good example of that. We run lean and tight, and we like to think we punch above our weight, but we also operate basically a global platform to exploit intellectual property. This is the point I just made about what the new fund will cover, and I think it's worth going into the particular companies that we've already created to start doing this. Aftershock to exploit comic content. This has been a growing sector in New York and also in the UK. And the interesting thing about this is that, as you'll probably be aware, comics, which are slightly niche in some ways, also lead into film and TV rights, which have an extensive value and have proved very successful, particularly in recent years. Dynamic television. The really interesting thing about this sector is that huge behemoths like Netflix are aggressively growing, and they are hungry for new content. So these TV series we see growing all the time all need to be created, they need to be funded. And then they are pushed out and distributed to the world. And if you get a Netflix deal, I'm working in one another context at the moment in the music sector, obviously, it's hugely valuable and hugely interesting. So building those relationships, which we've done in the past and have access to, is also an important part of this in terms of series development. Atlantic Screen Music, I mentioned, again, developing film scores. We've had some success. You see there 2 examples of recent ones: Atomic Blonde, which along with Kidnap, which we also funded, was in the top 10 films in the US box office in the last quarter of last year. Churchill, but various other ones I think will be covered. Lone Survivor is a sort of picture at the end of some of the other films we've done. You can sort of see which have made it big. And the rights from those films are about 72 scores sitting currently in Atlantic Screen Music alone. We then exploit in perpetuity. So we own a share of the revenues from those for the life of the composer plus 70 years. So this is an ongoing revenue stream, which is very easy to exploit if you know what you're doing and hard to exploit if you don't. I have 2 minutes left, so I'm going to just very quickly go back to, I don't know if we've got a slide in here on exit, but it's worth mentioning sort of where this goes. This is where the revenue streams come from. One of the things about us is that we're also quite pragmatic about what we're doing, and one of the problems with EIS is making sure you understand your exit when you go in at the beginning. So we see an exit in approximately 4 to 5 years from these various companies. They might go to different places. The TV series companies will probably go into the production world. The comic series may go to a number of players, but even private equity has been interested in those. The film scores quite possibly will buy back into Atlantic Screen Music, or will spin off into other places, we'll see. But by that point, the established revenues will be there. And we're also expert at selling these companies into the market. So again, that falls within our range of expertise. I think that the point to kind of leave you with for us is that we hope that we're creative and dynamic, but we're also stable in what we're offering. Our rates of return, if I can just go back to the first slide, we anticipate will be around, well, on a conservative basis, probably 15%, including the tax, although we would hope to be higher than that, so hence the plus. And we will expand into other areas of the media as we go. We're a very dynamic organisation. Obvious other areas are, for example, computer games. So the intellectual property content that we create in the companies that are there, we will then also put into other areas of the media as it grows. We would welcome a conversation with any of you about how to grow the fund, and obviously at the other end about businesses you know that are looking to develop IP themselves that we might invest in. Thank you very much for your time. Hopefully I'm approximately near the 7 minutes.